October 16, 1946. Before dawn breaks over the shattered city of Nuremberg, a cold silence hangs inside the prison walls. This is not a battlefield. There are no bombs falling. No crowds cheering. Yet history is about to close one of its darkest chapters. Behind steel doors and concrete corridors, the surviving architects of the Third Reich wait for death. These are not anonymous soldiers. These are the men who planned invasions, signed deportation orders, justified extermination, and watched an entire continent burn. Tonight, they will speak for the last time. The Nuremberg trials were more than a courtroom drama. They were a global reckoning, an unprecedented moment where power was stripped away, uniforms were replaced with prison clothes, and excuses were laid bare before the world. For the first time, men who once commanded armies were forced to answer to law, evidence, and the voices of the dead. Now, the verdicts have been read. The appeals denied. The sentences sealed. 10 men are condemned to hang. Each has been told they may offer final words before the noose tightens around their necks. Some prepare speeches. Others cling to ideology. A few rehearse defiance, convinced that history will one day vindicate them. They are wrong. Because these final words, spoken in fear, arrogance, denial, and desperation, will not redeem them. They will expose them. Expose how deeply they believed their own lies. Expose how little remorse they carried to the grave. Expose the terrifying truth that even at the edge of death, some monsters never repent. And as the gallows stand ready in the execution chamber below, one question hangs heavier than the rope itself. What does a man say when the world he helped destroy is judging him forever? The answers are about to be heard. Long before the gallows were constructed inside Nuremberg prison, these men were not born as executioners or war criminals. They were shaped by ambition, ideology, obedience, and opportunity. Joachim von Ribbentrop was once a champagne salesman, a man desperate for status in Germany's rigid social hierarchy. When Adolf Hitler offered him proximity to power, Ribbentrop transformed himself into a loyal servant of the regime. As foreign minister, he signed treaties with one hand and invasion orders with the other, helping ignite a war that consumed Europe. To the end, he insisted he was merely a diplomat, never a decision-maker. Wilhelm Keitel followed a different path. A career officer, disciplined and cautious, he believed obedience was the highest military virtue. As head of the German High Command, Keitel signed criminal orders authorizing hostage executions, scorched earth tactics, and the murder of civilians. Again and again, he chose loyalty over conscience. At Nuremberg, he would claim he had no choice. Then there was Julius Streicher. He did not command armies or sign treaties. He poisoned minds. As the publisher of Der Stimme, Streicher turned antisemitism into spectacle, printing grotesque lies, inciting hatred, and normalizing violence long before the first camps were built. His weapon was not a gun, but words. And his damage was incalculable. Towering over them all stood Hermann Göring, decorated war hero, Hitler's chosen successor, founder of the Gestapo. Göring embodied Nazi power at its peak, lavish uniforms, booming confidence, absolute self-belief. Even in captivity, he believed himself superior to the court judging him. Different backgrounds, different roles. Yet each man made the same fatal choice, to serve an ideology that demanded cruelty and to place loyalty above humanity. By the time the war ended, their paths had converged. From architects of terror to prisoners awaiting judgment. The crimes discussed at Nuremberg were not abstractions. They were measured in ruined cities, mass graves, and ash drifting from crematorium chimneys. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom became a ledger of suffering, each document, each photograph, each testimony tightening the noose long before execution day arrived. Prosecutors traced the war back to signatures on paper. Ribbentrop's name appeared on diplomatic agreements that masked invasions already planned. Poland, Norway, France. Each treaty was a lie told in ink, followed by tanks crossing borders. When confronted, he spoke of state necessity, as if millions of deaths were an unfortunate administrative outcome. Keitel's role was colder, more procedural. Orders bearing his approval authorized the execution of hostages in occupied territories, sometimes 50 civilians for every German soldier killed. Villages were erased in retaliation. Prisoners of war were starved, beaten, or shot. When these orders were read aloud in court, Keitel lowered his eyes, claiming he had only followed commands passed down from above. Streicher's crimes unfolded differently, but no less brutally. Issues of Der Stimme were entered into evidence, pages filled with caricatures, slander, and calls for annihilation. Witnesses testified how these publications prepared ordinary Germans to accept deportations, ghettos, and ultimately extermination. Hatred, repeated often enough, had become permission. Then came the films. Footage shot by Allied soldiers as the camps were liberated. Emaciated survivors staring into the camera. Piles of corpses stacked like discarded objects. The defendants were forced to watch. Some looked away. Others stared in silence. Göring smirked, later claiming the images were exaggerated. But the evidence was relentless. By the trial's end, the narrative was undeniable. These men had not merely served a regime. They had enabled a system of industrialized cruelty, step by step, order by order, until murder became policy. And with every revelation, the courtroom drew closer to a single conclusion. Justice was no longer a question of if, only when. Execution night arrives quietly. Just after midnight, October 16, 1946, guards move through the prison corridors with rehearsed precision. The condemned are awakened one by one. No speeches. No ceremony. Only footsteps echoing against stone, growing louder as each man is led toward the execution chamber. The gallows stand beneath harsh lights. 13 steps rise to the platform. A hood. A rope. A trapdoor waiting to open. Each prisoner is told the same thing. You may speak your final words. Joachim von Ribbentrop goes first. His voice trembles. He speaks of peace. Of Germany's future. He expresses loyalty to Hitler even now, insisting history will one day judge him kindly. It is a plea wrapped in denial. Moments later, the lever is pulled. Wilhelm Keitel follows. For the first time, the obedient soldier accepts guilt, not for murder, but for failing Germany. He asks God to have mercy on his soul. The sentence is carried out before his prayer finishes echoing in the room. Julius Streicher is last. He resists the guards, shouting obscenities, screaming anti-Semitic slurs into the chamber. He cries out Purimfest, invoking a biblical massacre in a final act of hatred. Even at death's edge, he chooses venom over silence. One by one, bodies fall through the trapdoor. Some die quickly. Others struggle, the rope tightening slowly as minutes stretch on. Witnesses avert their eyes. Doctors check for pulses. The machinery of justice grinds forward without pause. And yet, one absence haunts the room. Hermann Göring is not there. Hours earlier, he swallowed a hidden cyanide capsule in his cell, cheating the gallows, denying the court its final authority. Even in death, Göring sought control. As dawn approaches, the executions end. 10 men are dead. Their final words linger in the air, echoes of arrogance, delusion, and hate, revealing a chilling truth. For some, moral reckoning never comes. When the executions are complete, there is no applause. No declaration of victory. Only silence. The bodies are lowered, placed into plain coffins, and removed from the chamber under heavy guard. Each corpse is photographed, identified, and documented. There will be no doubt, no myth, no escape into legend. The men who once ruled through terror are now evidence, catalogued and finished. By morning, their remains are transported to Munich. There, in a crematorium away from public view, the bodies are burned. The ashes are gathered, mixed together, and scattered secretly into the Isar River. No graves. No memorials. No place for sympathizers to gather. The world will not remember them with shrines, only with records. This final act is deliberate. Justice, the Allies believe, must not create martyrs. The Nuremberg trials themselves are over, but their significance is only beginning. For the first time in history, a war ends not just with surrender, but with accountability. "I was only following orders" is formally rejected as a defense. Aggression, mass murder, and genocide are defined as crimes under international law. The message is clear: power does not grant immunity. Yet justice here is imperfect. Millions of victims never see their tormentors answer in court. Many perpetrators vanish into obscurity. Göring's suicide remains a bitter reminder that control, even in defeat, was never fully stripped away. Still, something irreversible has happened. The world has watched the architects of atrocity stand powerless. Their final words have been heard and judged wanting. The gallows have done what armies alone could not. They have drawn a line. And on one side stands unchecked cruelty. On the other, the fragile but necessary idea that even the most powerful can be held to account. The final words spoken at Nuremberg were not confessions. They were not apologies. They were not moments of clarity. They were mirrors. In those last seconds, stripped of rank, medals, and authority, the men who helped plunge the world into darkness revealed who they truly were. Some clung to ideology. Some hid behind obedience. Others chose hatred to the very end. Not one fully confronted the suffering they had unleashed. And that may be the most unsettling truth of all. Evil does not always collapse under the weight of guilt. Sometimes it endures, defiant, rationalized, and convinced it was right. Nuremberg did not prove that monsters feel remorse. It proved that justice must exist even when they do not. The trials became a warning written into history. Power without accountability leads to catastrophe, and silence in the face of cruelty is a form of participation. The law, imperfect and late, stood where conscience had failed. Today, the prison is quiet. The gallows are gone. The men are ash in a river whose name few remember. But their final words remain, archived, studied, and remembered, not as wisdom, but as evidence. Evidence of how easily civilization can fracture. Evidence of how ordinary ambition can enable extraordinary horror. Evidence of why remembering matters. If you believe history should never be reduced to numbers, if you believe justice, even delayed, still matters, then these stories must continue to be told. Like, subscribe, and enable notifications for more World War II history, justice, and untold aftermaths revealed. And in the next episode, we uncover the Nazi who escaped the gallows, and the secret that followed him into freedom.